This morning we are going to continue our series, Spiritual Narcolepsy, and I have something kind of exciting today. So how many have met Pastor Nano? Pastor Nano, he's running our first impressions and doing a lot of things during the week to help us out around here. And he's on staff now. He's one of our pastors on staff. He graduated from Trinity this past year, and he is looking and he wants to be a pastor one day. God has called him to ministry, and he is on our staff now, and I'm so happy about that. Well, this morning, Pastor Nano is going to bring you guys the word. So put your hands together, get excited. Pastor Nano, come on out.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Pastor Keith. Wow. When everyone said, when Pastor Keith said, do you know Pastor Nano, I think I only heard like 3 people, and I think all 3 of those were Joe and Charles. So thanks for the support, guys. I'm excited to be here, too. I can't express how thankful I am for the opportunity to speak to you guys this morning. If you watch the Olympics, it's a great day for America. How many of y'all are into the Olympics? Oh, not enough. In case you guys don't know, literally the last day comeback, U.S. came back and beat China by 1 gold medal. China had a few gold medals they should have won but didn't. So I'm excited about that. I'm even more excited about India. That's where I'm from. Today, India won its first ever track and field medal in like Olympics history. So yeah, India. I'm so excited. Something I love about India is we don't win a lot of gold medals. This was our only one this year. But when we win it, the entire nation is celebrating because one Indian winning something is equal to all of us winning something. And that's kind of a lesson there in itself. You know, when we read from these characters in the Bible, we need to celebrate with them because them doing it is kind of the same as us doing it because we serve the same exact God. So when we read this Bible story and we see great things happening, remember, that is what God has called you to do. Just like that one Indian dude won that medal and everyone's going to be excited like I am today in the U.S., you should be excited about what we learned from God's Word. That was not part of the sermon. That's why I need to open my notes. So, we're going to continue our series on spiritual narcolepsy. The first week we talked about being kind of an attentive soldier on the battlefield for Christ. And the second week we talked about not being a sleeping church and some of the signs of a healthy church. And today I'd like to talk a little bit more on a personal level. It's about staying awake in your personal life in what God has called you to do. I actually, in high school and in college, suffered a little bit with insomnia. Towards the night, I used to get anxiety. But the one time I'm not feeling insomnia is when I'm driving. That's when I get really sleepy. And yeah, some of these Sturgis bikers, I can't imagine them driving like hours and hours. But come an hour and a half, I'm like, I just cannot do it. I need to go to sleep. I need to pull over is how I feel. So, my first strategy is always to drink some coffee. I don't know if there's some coffee drinkers while on the road, but that helps me. But, the coffee only helps so much because the caffeine kick wears off and I just really need to pee. So that really doesn't do it for me. So I need to start think deep thoughts, think exciting thoughts to keep me awake. And then, I start falling asleep again. So then, I have to get in, low scale, kind of self-harm, just as I'm, walking, just get up, Nano. You got to live. I don't know if you guys have seen Mr. Bean's Holiday. I'm a huge fan of Mr. Bean. Everyone in India is. But in Mr. Bean's Holiday, he's driving, overnight to get this actress to her audition. And, he, plays this music, then he, starts dozing off, and he's like, no, I need to stay awake. So he starts slapping himself, and he dozes off, so he needs to start staying awake. And then he finally puts his finger in the cigarette lighter, the smartest guy on earth, and then he stays awake. And then the last scene of that, he drives into this beach, and everyone in the car wakes up and they're so excited to be here. And the camera goes on to Mr. Bean, and he has 4 toothpicks holding his eyes up. But you know what I love about Mr. Bean? He was literally willing to do anything to get to where he needed to be. And when it comes to this whole spiritual narcolepsy context, we need to do anything, even if that's sticking toothpicks in our eyes, to get where God has called us to be. God has called us to do stuff that we don't think we're going to be able to do. Maybe you don't even want to do what God has called you to do. But if you fall asleep on the drive, to where God has called you to be, you won't make it. You're going to put those in your life in danger. You're going to put yourself in danger. And sadly, God has called you to this beautiful beach in Paris, just like Mr. Bean had to go. God has called you to do amazing things. And if you can't stay awake, you're not going to make it there. So this morning we're going to talk about a story. I love reading Bible stories. It's kind of my passion. So we're going to go through an entire story. So I hope you guys are ready to learn a little bit about the Bible. And remember, one Indian wins a gold medal. We all are excited. When we read this Bible story, this is what God is going to do in our lives. So in this Bible story, we're talking about Elijah and Elisha, two of the greatest prophets of the Old Testament. And in this context, Elijah is the greatest prophet of the Old Testament. And he has his little student, his sidekick named Elisha. And God has called Elijah to go to heaven. And Elijah's done so many miracles throughout his life. He's the guy who brought fire from heaven to show everyone that God was real. He's the guy who raised the dead to life. And in this story, he literally goes up in a chariot, in a fiery chariot. He swirls up into heaven. So Elijah's a pretty cool dude. And you got his mediocre friend Elisha, just kind of a student, just follows around and watches what Elijah does basically at this point in life. But right now, Elijah's about to say bye to Elisha, and Elijah's going to be taken in heaven. And that's the story we're going to be reading, their last time together. So if you have your Bible, if you don't, it's on the screen. But we're going to turn to 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 1 through 8. And I'll try to be slow because I get super excited about the Bible. It says, "Now when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven by a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. And Elijah said to Elisha, 'Please stay here, for the Lord has sent me as far as Bethel.' But Elijah said, 'As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you.' So they went down to Bethel. And the sons of the prophets who were in Bethel came out of Elisha and said to him, 'Do you know that today the Lord is going to take your master from over you?' And he said, 'Yes, I know it. Keep quiet.' Elijah said to Elisha, 'Please stay here, for the Lord has sent me to Jericho.' But he said, 'As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you.' So they came to Jericho. The sons of the prophets who were at Jericho drew near to Elisha and said to him, 'Do you know that today the Lord will take your master away from you?' And he answered, 'Yes, I know it. Keep quiet.' Then Elijah said to him, 'Please stay here, for the Lord has sent me to the Jordan.' But he said, 'As the Lord lives and as you yourself live, I will not leave you.' So the two of them went on. 50 men of the sons of the prophets also went and stood at some distance from them, as they both were standing by the Jordan. Then Elijah took his cloak, rolled it up, struck the water, and the water was parted to the one side and to the other, till the two of them could go over on dry ground." Now we're going to pause right there. The way this story is written is kind of confusing, but there's two different things that happen in 3 cycles. I think I made it even more confusing. But basically, the first point we're going to talk about when it comes to, avoiding to fall asleep is say no to passivity. And the way this shows up in the story is 3 different times Elijah and Elisha are walking together, and Elijah's the master, and he says, "Elisha, go home. I need to go." And Elisha says, "As God lives, I'm not going to leave you." And then second time, I think it's going from Bethel to Jericho. Yes, Elisha visited this Bethel. From going here to Jericho, thank you guys for knowing the name of our church. From going to Bethel to Jericho, Elijah says, "Elisha, you go home. You stay here. I need to go." And Elisha says, "As God lives, I'm not going to leave you." Then they get to Jericho, and they need to go to Jordan. And Elijah says, "Elisha, I've told you 2 times, Bill, stay here." And Elisha says, "No, I told you, as God lives, I will not leave you." And this is not, I'm not saying disobey those in authority over you or disobey your masters on earth, but I'm saying that Elisha knew that this was not his time to leave. Elisha knew that there was something down the road. Elisha knew that there was something big coming in his life. And if he was passive, and if he didn't fight for it, if he didn't say, "No, I will not leave you," he wouldn't have made it to where God had called him to be. Last week, Pastor Keith said, you don't need to be sleepy to be a narcoleptic. And that means sometimes it attacks you all of a sudden, and it's in that moment where you need to say, "No, I'm going to stay awake." And each and every one of these moments is where Elisha told Elijah, "No, I'm going to stay awake. I'm not going to be like a spiritual narcoleptic and fall asleep, but I'm going to pursue what God has called me to do. You keep saying stay here, but I know God has called me to do something bigger and something on that side of the Jordan, so I'm going to follow you." And we're going to see the amazing blessing that follows that obedience to God. Billy Sunday, I saw, he gave us a quote for today's sermon, and something cool about Billy Sunday I actually learned is that he was a professional baseball player, so we have some cool Christian athletes in our history. But anyway, he was also a revivalist who brought many people to Jesus, and he said, a revival is needed when carelessness and unconcern have kept the people asleep. So from this we see one of the things that keeps us asleep as Christian is carelessness about our own spiritual journey. That willingness to say, okay, I think I can stop. Okay, I think I'm good enough. That's not what Elijah said. That's not what Elisha said. When Elijah said, stay here, he wasn't careless and unconcerned about his journey, but he said, I know this is what you're saying, but I know that that's where God has called me, and I'm not going to stop at anything until I get to where God has called me. Many times, in our life, this attitude of passivity can come in the form of quote-unquote good voices. This is the master. Elijah's the master, and he's telling Elisha, you should probably stop here. He's telling Elisha, you're done. My relationship with you is over. I need to get to heaven. See you later. It's kind of what Elijah's saying. That's probably not what his heart was. He was maybe testing Elisha. But we see that this passivity, this voice of unconcern, sometimes comes from what we consider good voices. And often we like to rationalize being passive. Like, I serve at small group, and I come every single Sunday. I even come early sometimes to talk to people. That is all that God has called me to do, so I'm going to stay passive in my life. Like sometimes this whole passivity concept, it sounds good to us. It sounds comfortable, and it sounds logical, like I don't have that much energy to give. I'm an introvert, and I know a lot of introverts will say, I'm better off when I get my time alone for people. And we can use that as an excuse to leave people in the dust and hang out alone because that's what's best for us. But the truth is we need to say no to this passivity in our lives when we think this, I'm good enough for God. God loves me no matter what. I don't need to do anything. We need to say no to that passivity, or else we're just going to, kind of fall asleep in this comfortable Christianity. So the first thing we have talked about in avoiding falling asleep is saying no to passivity. The second thing we're going to talk about is say no to discouragement. And as I said, there's kind of two different things going on here. The first thing is Elijah keeps telling Elisha to go home. So that's kind of the first obstacle, the first roadblock, if you will. And the second one is we see this weird group called the Sons of the Prophets. The Sons of the Prophets were actually like a Bible school, if you will. They're like learning how to be prophets. They're learning how to speak God's word. They're learning how to hear the voice of God. And they keep coming and telling Elisha, do you know he's going to leave you today? This guy who you keep hanging out with, the great prophet Elijah, the only reason people know you is because of Elijah. Do you know he's leaving you today? Often, different people or different circumstances can try to take our eyes off of what God is doing in our life. And that's kind of what we see happening here. People are discouraging Elisha. Do you know your best friend, your master, the only reason people love you, do you know he's leaving you today? And I love Elisha's answer so insanely much. He says, I know, be quiet. How awesome if we say to our discouragements, when people come and say, you have gone as far as you can, you are going to be alone today. You have no source of power today. People don't care about you. How awesome is it if we can say, I know, be quiet. You voices of discouragement in my life are trying to keep me from getting where God has called me to go. Be quiet. And why is that? Because, my voice cracked. Still going through puberty at 22. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7 says, for God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of power and love and of self-control. And I know this is from the New Testament, but I know Elisha had to know this. Because when people came and told Elisha, you're going to be alone today. Your master's going to leave you today. You're going to be without any power today. He says, I know God has not given me a spirit of fear, but of love and power and self-control. So you fears, be quiet. I'm going to pursue what God has called me to do, and I'm going to go on in my life. If you've seen me, I'm a pretty good musician. They need me on the worship team pretty bad. Just kidding. That's a horrible intro to what I'm about to say. But I started playing guitar when I was 14, and I remember one day I was playing guitar with some people, and I was trying to sing, and I was brand new to singing. And one of them told me, rough times in my life, it's about to get emotional. One of them told me, Nano, can you be quiet for a few minutes? You're singing so off key that I can't sing in the right key. Oof. Yes, someone said that to me. And for 6 years, literally for 6 years, I did not sing again in front of people. And I only started singing again two or 3 years ago, back in Bible college, when someone really forced me to do something I didn't want to do. But you know what? Me singing to my God, to my best friend, is the best thing I have ever done in my life. That's how I connect with God. And you know what's super sad? 6 years ago, I did not say to my discouragement, I know I'm not good, be quiet. I should have said that, but I didn't. And because of that, I missed out on 6 stinking years of the best way I could have connected with God. On my favorite way of connecting with God. I could have been on American Idol by now, I'm so good. But I missed out because I didn't say no to discouragement. So the second point about avoiding falling asleep is saying no to our discouragement, knowing that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power to say, I know I am not good enough, but be quiet because I have God. I know I have no power, but be quiet. You fears, you discouragements, be quiet. I'm not going to stop and fall asleep on the way. Be quiet because I know God has called me to do bigger things. I know God is on my side. He has given me a spirit of power, of love, and of self-control. Now we're going to move on into my favorite part of the story. This is so good, so I hope you guys are excited. We've talked about 2 ways to avoid falling asleep, and now we're going to talk about 2 ways to keep moving forward. Because the best way not to fall asleep is to wake up and actually do something. If you're falling asleep and you lie on your sofa, you're going to fall asleep. Get up and take a walk or drink some coffee or something. But we're going to read 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 8 through 14. And this is where it gets real juicy and good. Then Elijah took his cloak and rolled it up and struck the water. And the water was parted to the one side and to the other, till the 2 of them could go over on dry ground. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, ask what I shall do for you before I am taken away from you. And Elisha said, please let there be a double portion of your spirit on me. And he said, you have asked a hard thing, yet if you see me as I am being taken away from you, it shall be so for you. But if you do not see me, it shall not be so. And as the 2 of them went on and talked, behold, chariots of fire and horses of fire separated the 2 of them. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. And Elisha saw it, and he cried, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. And he saw him no more. Then he took hold of his own clothes, tore them into 2 pieces, and he took up the cloak of Elijah that had fallen from him and went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan. Then he took the cloak of Elijah that had fallen from him and struck the water, saying, where is the Lord, the God of Elijah? And when he had struck the water was parted to the one side and to the other, and Elisha went over. And the first point we're going to take out of this is get up and ask the big questions. So Elisha has said no to discouragement. He said no to the sons of the prophets who are saying, do you know you're going to be alone? He said no to his own master who said, you should probably go home. You should probably leave me. He has said no to discouragement. He has refused to turn around. He is not a spiritual narcoleptic. He has not been passive. And he finally gets to where he knows he needs to be. And Elijah says to him, Elisha, you have literally refused to listen to anyone but yourself. What in the world do you want from me? And Elisha looks at the greatest prophet of the Old Testament that had come until now. He looks at the greatest prophet. This guy had raised the dead to life. This guy is cast on fire from heaven. And this guy's going to be picked up in a fiery chariot. He tells this amazing old prophet, the greatest prophet ever known, I want double of what you have. I want double of what you have. And God is saying the same thing to you. You know, church, you are refusing to fall asleep, or so some of you are refusing to fall asleep. You're refusing to give in to discouragement. You are refusing to turn away. What do you want now? Why are you awake, church? And this is our opportunity to say, I have seen what you have done in Bethel. I have seen what you have done in Rapid City. I have seen what you have done in my life, God. But that's not enough. I want double. That's why I'm awake. That's why I'm here to ask for more. That's the whole reason I'm living. Lord, I want double of the goodness that I have seen so far. And let me blow your minds. Elijah is credited with 8 miracles in the Old Testament, including amazing things that we almost only see in Jesus. He raises the dead to life. He brings down fire. And he does 6 other miracles. 8 phenomenal miracles. Elisha, stinking 16. literally double of the greatest prophet that had ever lived. And that's why we need to stay awake. Because God, when we stay awake and we ask God, he's not going to say, I think you're selfish. I don't know why in the world you want salvation for your friends. No, he's not going to say that. We will literally get double portion. Elisha got double portion of what Elijah had ever done. And towards the end of Elisha's life is my favorite story about Elisha. So Elijah's up in heaven by now, and towards the end of Elisha's life is my favorite story that comes. He's on his deathbed, about to die, and he says, can you get me the king? And King Joash, he was the king at that time, and King Joash comes up to him, and little history lesson, at this point in life, the Syrian Empire was the superpower, where Israel's scared of them. They can't win them. They can't win in battle. The Syrians are the superpower, and they're torturing Israel, and they are literally surrounding Israel and blockading it. And Elisha says, get me the king. And he says, King Joash, open the window, take one of your arrows that you have, and shoot it out the window. And King Joash does that. And he says, that arrow represents the victory that you're going to get over the entire Syrian army. And then it gets even better, in case that wasn't good enough for you guys. It gets better. He says, pull out some of your arrows that you have and put them on the ground. And King Joash does it, and he puts it on the ground. And Elisha says, now stomp on those arrows. So the King Joash walks over and he stomps on them like 1, 2, 3. He's feeling pretty good about himself. He's feeling strong. And Elisha says, that is so sad. Why did you not step on them 5 or 6 times? Because you stepped on them 3 times, you're going to defeat the superpower, the Syrians, 3 times. But if you would have stepped on them 5 or 6 times, you would have defeated them 5 or 6 times. You would have done the impossible that no one expects you to do 5 or 6 times. Church, why are you stopping and stomping on the arrows only 3 times? Why are you staying awake only to defeat your fears 3 times? Elisha and even God is calling you to step on it 5 or 6 times. Don't just fill your homes with talk about the day. Why would you settle for that when you can settle for talking about God in your homes all day? Why would you just come to church when you can transform church, when you can be the church, when you can make this church absolutely blow up? This superpower, we need to ask God, just as we learn in the story about stomping on the arrows, not 3 times, but 5 or 6 times. We need to learn to ask God, not just for what we think is impossible, but for double and triple and quadruple impossible. We need to say to the superpowers in our life, kind of the Syrians who surround us, I'm not going to defeat you once. That would be a great victory. I'm not just going to defeat you 3 times, but I'm going to defeat the troubles in my life 5 or 6 times because I'm going to stop at nothing to do the great plans that God has called me to do. Not discouragement will stop me. No passivity will stop me. I will stomp on these arrows 5 or 6 times. Lord, I ask you not only for my neighbor to come to church, but I ask you for my entire apartment complex to come to church. I ask you not only for my neighbor, but my entire street to come to church. I pray not only that you heal me from my headache today, but that you would heal me from whatever chronic disease I have for the rest of my life. That's what God wants to hear you say. Ask the big questions. Lord, I am awake because I want a double portion of your blessing. I cannot survive without a double portion of your blessing. That is what I feel God is speaking to us today. The best way to avoid being a spiritual narcoleptic, to avoid falling asleep on your journey into what God has called you to do, is by getting up and moving and getting up and doing what he's called you to do. To get up and ask God, I want more of you. I know you've been good to me this last week, but I want double of what you gave me last week, this week. And next week when I avoid discouragement, I'm going to come up and ask of double of that. Because that is what God has called us to do. He's not giving us passivity. He's not giving us discouragement. He's called us to do great, huge things. And the last point I'd like to talk about is get up and walk in the blessing. And this is kind of the end of the story. Elisha has stayed with Elijah this entire time, refusing to give in to discouragement, refusing to be passive about his relationship with Jesus. And he asks for a double portion, but he doesn't stop there. It doesn't end at the asking. Elisha goes up and picks what his master had, and he walks in the blessing that he knows God has given him, and he goes straight up and splits that river straight in half and walks through it. Elisha lives the rest of his life commanding kings. Elijah saw one chariot. Believe it or not, Elisha saw an entire army of chariots of the Lord because he chose to get up and walk in this blessing that he knew he was going to receive. It doesn't end at not falling asleep. God hasn't called you to not fall asleep. He's called you to wake up and live in his entire blessing and the double portion that he's called you to live. He's called you to stomp on the arrows, on the bad situations of your life 5 or 6 times, not just 3. And when you do that, when you stay awake, God will be there at the end of it. In James chapter 1, verses 23 to 24, it says, But be doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks intensely at himself, his natural face in a mirror, and looks at himself and he goes away and forgets it. If you don't go out and walk in the blessing, if you don't get out and actually do stuff for Jesus, if you don't get up and actually invite your neighbor to church, if you don't get up and actually go home and pray for healing, if you don't chase with all your life as Elisha chased, if you don't chase the call of God on your life, nothing is going to happen. Because it's as if you looked at yourself in the mirror and you forgot who you were. It's as if you came to church on Sunday morning and you forgot who Pastor Keith is or Pastor Nano is. Because God has called you to be doers of the word, to be doers of what he has called you to do. So I'd like to end this service with a time, just kind of quiet meditation within our own hearts. And I have 2 questions for you guys that are going to go up on the screen, which I need to pull out my notes for, of course. And it says, the 2 questions are, how have you let passivity or discouragement lull you to sleep? In your life, what are the specific circumstances, whether it's people speaking to you, or whether it's your own health, or whether it's you feel like you're not enough? How have you let passivity or discouragement lull you to sleep in places of your life which you should be awake? And the second question is, what is God showing you to seek the double blessing and act in? Not only is God calling you not to be discouraged, but God is calling you to play double blessing in your areas of discouragement. So I'd like to take about 2 minutes out here as Madison plays the keys, and everyone can just think to themselves, ask yourselves these questions. And I promise you, if you seek God through your discouragement, seek God when you feel passive, and you ask him for a double blessing and you act in it, there's no doubt that he'll show up. There's no doubt that you will have a double portion, that you will have victory. What God has done in the life of Elisha and Elijah is what he's going to do in your life. So let's spend the next 2 minutes just praying to God and asking these questions, and I will close in prayer that after that. Elijah, God of Elisha, I come before you today, bringing myself and each and every person who has attended this Sunday service. Lord, I pray that you would give us the strength and give us the knowledge of the power of you, that when we face discouragements in life, that we say, I know I'm not good enough. Be quiet because God is with me. I just pray that any passivity in the room or any confusion over what you have called your people to do would be lifted right now, and that they would have clear ideas of where you have called them. And lastly, I pray that you would rise up your people to ask big questions, not just to settle for the single portion, but the double portion, to get on their knees and say, God, I want all that you have for me. And I want more than that. I want more than what I could ever imagine. Lord, I just pray that you would awaken your church and help us to stay awake this morning. That you would bless each and every one of us with a double portion of your blessing and your will in our life this morning.